You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is World Anvil is a browser-based world-building platform designed for all world builders, writers and novelists, dungeon masters, game developers, and everyone else. World Anvil keeps your world setting safe and organized, helps you find your characters, locations, plots, timelines, and maps quickly and easily as you write. Then, if you choose, you can showcase your amazing world building to the world, beautifully and interactively, to keep your readers engaged. You can even use our professional tier to build your career selling access to behind-the-scenes content your readers will love and growing your community. Build your world setting in any genre with over 25 custom-built world-building templates, complete with prompts to inspire your creativity. Allow your readers to explore the public parts of your world in an innovative new way with interactive maps, timelines, and wiki-style articles. Give special access to co-authors, beta readers, customers, or patrons to see exclusive behind-the-scenes content. There's a free version to get started with all of the major features. Guild membership offers you a host of extra options, including comprehensive privacy settings, co-authors, presentation options, and so much more. Join our community of over 800,000 world builders, including professional authors. Take part in competitions and learn more about world building at this fantastic online community. Use the coupon code HANK to get 20% off all 6 and 12-month subscriptions. WorldAnvil.com. I'm a recent convert and I know you will be too. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Jeffery Deaver back on the show with us today. Last year, he was with us talking about a brand new book and a brand new series, The Never Game, with a brand new character called Colter Shaw. Today, he returns with the next installment in the Colter Shaw series. It's called The Goodbye Man. And I'll tell you what, Jeff, if there was ever a prescient book for the times that we're living in, The Goodbye Man is it. I'll tell you what, there's no way you could have planned for some of the things that we get to experience in this book, but man, is it right on time. Welcome back to the show, by the way.
Well, thank you, Hank. Really good to talk to you. Yeah, I wrote the book a year and a half ago, so who knows what's going to happen, but look at that.
Right. Oh, I'll tell you what, Jeff, your books are, you've kind of invented this, I don't know that you invented it, but you've really popularized the genre of the race against the clock thriller. And that's one thing that we can always count on, that when we open the first page of a Jeffery Deaver book, we know we are better hang on, because we're in for a white knuckle ride. Do you remember the first book that you read that kind of turned you on to the possibility of what a writer can do to readers? That the thing that made you feel unsafe until the end. Do you remember when you first got that feeling?
I've always loved, I'll call it popular fiction, and I'm not ashamed of that at all. It's, Shakespeare was popular fiction. Hemingway was popular fiction. You could call it art or not, but the fact is these are storytellers. And I knew from a very early age, reading James Bond, for instance, reading John D. MacDonald, the Travis McGee series, that I wanted to write. Now, those were mystery writers. Mystery in the sense that something happened and the detective or the hero then goes on to solve the crime. And I love that. But they were a bit more leisurely than what I had in mind. I always wanted to do and to watch and to do roller coaster kind of stories. And I think the one that did that for me was Frederick Forsyth's book. The name just went right out of my head. Actually, it was the one where the fellow is trying to kill de Gaulle. It will occur to me in a minute, I'm sure. But the idea was that the assassin, the ace assassin, moved very, very quickly from scene to scene, and he was pursued relentlessly by the hero, police detective, and there was never a moment of rest in the entire story. And so I thought, now that's what I want to do. I really want to have a hero that moves the story along so quickly that readers don't get any rest. I want them to read it in a single setting. So my books take place over a couple days. There are, there's really no time to pause. Just race along, make a roller coaster.
It really leaves readers with mixed emotions, because I absolutely want to read in one sitting because I need to know what's happening. But then again, I know that when that's over, I'm going to have to wait a year for the next Jeffery Deaver book. And so I want to savor it, and I'm torn.
I get that. I'm so honored that I get that complaint all the time.
Yeah.
And the name of the book is Day of the Jackal. How could I forget that? Of course.
Of course.
The Frederick Forsyth, that moved along so quickly, and that inspired me to write that way. But Hank, I appreciate your thoughts. And I feel the same. I remember when I was into the John le Carré books. Well, I still am, but at the time I had more time to read when I was younger, and wasn't working on so many books as I am now. And there were thick books, absolutely brilliant, but they would take them about 2 years to write one. And I'd have to slow myself down because I didn't want it to be over with.
I know that there are, speaking of popular fiction, there are sort of archetypal stories and archetypal protagonists. And maybe a story is about, someone that goes on an adventure, or a stranger shows up to town. There are these kinds of stories that we tell over and over in many different ways, but they all kind of boil down to a lot of similar themes. Where does Colter Shaw fit into kind of the pantheon of archetypes?
It's great you mentioned that, Hank, because I have in mind, when I write a book, two scenarios. One is somebody goes on a quest, and the other is a stranger comes to town, as you were just saying. Well, Colter Shaw kind of fits the bill for both of those. He's the one who goes on a quest, and then shifting to the point of view of the town where he arrives, then he's the stranger who comes to town. Lincoln Rhyme, for instance, is the fellow who goes on intellectual quests, but he can't really move, having his disability. But the stranger who comes to town in the Lincoln Rhyme books, well, that's the bad guy, like the bone collector or the watchmaker. But Colter Shaw is the stranger who comes to town. You probably know the great movie based on the book by Jack Schaefer, Shane, the movie starring Alan Ladd Jr., wonderful film. He's the gunslinger, the strong, silent type who comes to town and gets embroiled in a conflict between the good farmers and the cattle baron, the evil cattle baron. And we know he's evil because his sidekick is Jack Palance, so he has to be evil. and then Alan Ladd Jr., playing Shane, saved the day and then rides off into the sunset, just like Colter Shaw does.
When what's the difference between what Colter does, and I want you to try to tell people exactly what Colter does for a living, but he's not a PI necessarily, and he's definitely not a bounty hunter, but he shares a lot of those skills. And what exactly does Colter do? Yes,
he's a job that he does a job that I made up. He's a professional reward seeker. And I'll back up a little bit. He was inspired by a story I read, or may have heard on the radio, I don't recall, about a reward being offered by the U.S. government for tens of millions of dollars for information leading to the location, not the arrest, but the location of a terrorist, someone in the Middle East. And I thought, interesting, what if somebody went after that reward, found the terrorist, gave the information to the government, got the nest egg of $2 million, and then all kinds of crazy stuff happened after that. It was going to be a standalone book, and it never occurred to me at the time to make a series out of it. Well, I researched this reward thing a bit, and it turns out there are thousands and thousands of rewards offered every day by the police, by prison authorities, by private individuals. And it could be for an escaped convict, for a killer that the police can't find, for a missing child that the parents are offering a reward to locate. And I thought, what if somebody made a living out of this, going after those rewards? Now, most of the rewards on the books are for information leading to the arrest or information leading to the discovery of a missing person. The police don't want somebody out there strapping on an assault rifle and trying to track down the convict. They just want tips. But that Colter Shaw says, well, I don't want to do that. He's a restless man. He wants to go out into the wilderness and find the bad guy. And his role is not to arrest them himself, although that has happened on various occasions, much less get into a gun battle with them, although he does carry a weapon. But his job is simply to locate them. Then he will call the police, and they'll come in and arrest the bad fellow, or he'll find the missing individual. Bounty hunters and bail enforcement agents are a very specific type of job. They generally go after warrant skippers, bail skippers, low-level criminals. Colter Shaw is restless in body, but he's also restless in mind. He needs challenges. He frankly doesn't even care about the money that much. He's got resources of his own, but what he wants to do is be challenged. And so he goes after the big rewards, the ones that are for individuals who are particularly clever bad guys, or for individuals who are particularly vulnerable and that the authorities don't care about. And of course, a bail bondsman, enforcement agent, is not going to care about a missing child. That's Colter's up against the clock and the elements to track down someone like that.
What I love about the character of Colter Shaw is like you said, his real motivation is to be challenged and to solve this puzzle, if you will. And while he does lots of wonderful things and wants to see justice served, he's not a vigilante. He's not Batman out there looking to bring justice to the world. Which, and not that he's amoral, I don't mean that, but it's an interesting set of motivations that you've given him.
Oh, he's absolutely a good guy. There's no question about that. Very moral. And sometimes he doesn't even take the reward if the family who's offered it can't pay it if they don't have the money, or he works out an easy payments, much to the dismay of his business manager, who treats this as a profession. She says, Colter, you earned the money. Where is it? He said, oh, I forgot to pick up the check. So, but on the other hand, there's definitely a dark side to Colter Shaw's life. He is the son of a man who was a brilliant scientist, but he and his wife, also a brilliant professor and doctor, fled the San Francisco Bay Area for reasons that I'm slowly unlayering. The father, Ashton Shaw, became a survivalist for reasons that we now know, and it's not giving anything away really. He became the enemy of an organization of some kind. We don't know who it is yet. We will in the next book, and so he had to teach his children survival skills, because he knew that this organization was not only going to come after Ashton Shaw and his family, including Colter, Colter's mother, and Colter's two siblings, but presented a bigger threat. So he became a survivalist in the classic survivalist sense, not the wacko survivalist, but the survivalist who simply wants to have the resources and the skills to survive in a difficult situation. And that meant Colter had to be prepared to be a really tough guy, too, and not put up with any nonsense, and to maybe cross the line, because the police do not want a reward seeker or a bail bond enforcement agent to step over the line. The police are the police. These are civilians, and there's only so much they can do. But Colter Shaw, to find the bad guy before he kills again, to find the missing child before he or she is injured by the elements or someone else who might be pursuing them, he'll do whatever he needs to do to make sure that good prevails.
I always love your books because I learn something in the midst of it. There's something that I come away at the end of the book knowing more than I went in with. And you touched on.
Oh, thank you.
You touched on the area of survivalism, and the story also deals with cults. There's a cult that plays into the story. How did you begin your research to find the nuggets? Because you give us just enough information to make it believable without writing a how to start your own cult instruction manual. How do you find the kinds of research to do, and then determine the level of detail that needs for believability?
Well, like you, Hank, I'm as a journalist, I'm curious about different phenomena, things I don't know about, and I had an inkling about cults from reading in the press, the Branch Davidian in Waco under David Koresh, Jim Jones's cult in Guyana, Charles Manson, of course. In fact, I wrote a book based on Manson, The Sleeping Doll, that came out about 10 years ago. So I was interested in the phenomenon, but I had to go back to actually an experience I had with a cult, personal experience. I was living in New York. I was single. I met an attractive, smart, intelligent woman, and we had a nice conversation, and she said, "What are you doing Friday night?" And my answer was, "Well, whatever you're doing Friday night." Well, it turned out what she was doing Friday night was bringing me to a cult because she was trying to recruit people. And the cult, I don't remember the name, and if I did, I probably wouldn't want to give it anyway. But it scared the hell out of me, frankly. I was there for only a couple of hours as soon as I realized what was going on, and I did not sign up, never saw her again, and never talked to anybody in the cult. But what I remembered about it was a large room of maybe 100, 150 people, but no, probably more than that, maybe 300, 200 or 300. And when the cult leader walked out on stage with lights glaring down on him, wearing a white outfit, the audience went mad, and they stopped becoming individual human beings. They became this creature of some sort. And I thought, this is scary. I didn't feel physically threatened, but I felt that the crowd could, at his whim, do whatever he told them to do. And the frenzy and the clapping and the chanting made me so uncomfortable. I left as soon as I could. No, I'm not a joiner. I don't play well with others, so there was no risk of my joining. I was never going to join the cult, but I certainly thought, well, you know what? I'm going to put this in the back of my mind and write about it someday. And it took about 30 years, probably more than that, 35 years to write it into the Goodbye Man. And I did a huge amount of research. If your listeners want to take a look at the book, in the back there's a bibliography of probably 15 or 20 books I used in researching it. All fascinating subject and far more pervasive than I thought. There are about 50,000 active cults in the United States alone. Some very small. We know the big ones, of course, but the smaller ones, they could be as small as a family. And a cult leader, the father, they're mostly men, cult leaders, although there are some women. but the cult leaders in a familial cult will rule the family with an iron fist. They will brainwash the children, homeschool them with some of the strangest ideas you can imagine. It's small, but it's still a cult.
What's unsettling? About 25 years ago, or a little longer than that now, we all watched the Waco Branch Davidian cult and how that unraveled. And there was a TV miniseries that was done, and it's now on Netflix. And my wife and I watched it a couple weeks ago. We lived through that watching it on TV with the rest of the people, but it was interesting to watch back and see those events unfold again. You've got there were several elements there that were interesting. You had this charismatic leader, and then a group full of joiners, and it people that compromised their beliefs little by little until they're in this very strange situation. And then you've got a government who may or may not have overreacted, overstepped, and you get this tinderbox that just evolves out of that, and bad things happen. We are, as we're recording this, we're kind of in the middle of a lockdown, quarantine. Tensions are rising. People are getting agitated. And this is something that just happens when people, are forced to sit still for a while. And I'm afraid I see a lot of these things. The possibility, like this is a prime time for a charismatic leader to, get things going like this, and that's why I said it's such an interesting time for a book like this to come out, because I can see a lot of these elements in the world that we're living in now. How does Colter Shaw, how does he interact with this cult? What happens there? What are the situations that bring him into their world?
Sure. There's an event. I don't want to give this away, but there's an event that brings the cult to Shaw's attention. And he at first does not really understand, because he himself is the definition of the independent individual. He would never consider joining any kind of organization. That's why he's not even a private eye. It's why he's not a policeman. He loves investigating, but he can't work with others. So, but he becomes aware of this cult and also thinks there may be something dangerous about it. And so he has a history as a reward seeker. So he decides that, and has been in the press, so he decides to go undercover, has an assumed name, and has his wonderful private eye, Mac McKenzie, come up with fake IDs for him. And he infiltrates the cult to see what's going on. And there's actually a scene, one of my favorite scenes in the book, where not the cult leader, but one of his lieutenants is working with Shaw to do the indoctrination stuff that Shaw understands he has to go through to get undercover and find out what's going on. And little by little, Shaw starts to relate to this fellow who's very sharp, and he gets right to the core of an issue that has plagued Colter Shaw all his life about his relationship with his brother, his missing brother. And although Shaw is slowly unpeeling the layers of the onion to get deep within the cult and finding things that are disturbing, on the other hand, part of him is thinking, you know what, this is helping me kind of understand my brother. Maybe there's something we can do to take a step further along. And then he thinks, no, what am I doing? But he's seduced as well. And I hope the readers will be seduced up to a point thinking, wow, this cult, it could do something. I've known people who want to help me like this. And then maybe there's a big surprise, and after that, another big surprise, and maybe after that, another big surprise, because it's a typical Jeffery Deaver book. What can I say?
Well, Speaking of typical Jeffrey Deaver books, you mentioned earlier the Lincoln Rhyme series of books made into a movie quite famously with Denzel Washington. Now is on TV on NBC as a recurring series. What do you think about that? As a writer, how do you like seeing your characters played out episodically? As opposed to this 2 hour window on the big screen.
I'm a big television fan, and I was delighted when NBC decided to bring the book to a series. I knew, and wisely on their part, that they would change it considerably, because the book is in fact written as a movie. We were talking about how a Deaver book unfolds, and it goes very, very quickly. One sitting read, if possible. Well, that's a movie. And the Bone Collector book turned into the movie quite accurately. But that's not going to make a series. So what they did was they took the basic concept and took Lincoln Rhymes' personality and Amelia Sachs's personality. And I think his name Ron Solito, and in my book he's Lon Solito. I think they changed the name, which is fine. And they did something entirely different. I think the showrunners whom I spoke to were a little nervous at first. They thought, well, we're gonna have to change it to make 9 hours worth of TV show. And I thought, oh, that's with my blessing, because that's your area of expertise. I'm not the least concerned about them altering any property. I'm working on another deal now. I can't talk about it, with another major network. For another TV show, and I want them to do something else. I want them to use the title. That's very important. I want them to put my name on it, which legally, contractually, they'll have to do. Oh, and I want them to send me the checks that I'm entitled to. But after that, it's their baby. Good on you. And I'm getting back to writing my next book and short stories.
Do you see Colter Shaw coming to the screen?
That's a very likely possibility, and I'll have to end that segment. There was a great British show called, I think they did an American version here, and there was an episode called To Play the King. House of Cards was the whole episode. And I think that was, I think Kevin Spacey was in it in America. Ian Richardson was the bad guy in the British version. And he would do all kinds of nefarious things behind the scenes. And when he was called on it, he would say, well, you might think that, but I couldn't possibly comment, which was an admission that, yes, he had done it, but he couldn't say anything about it. So in response to, will Colter Shaw come to the big or small screen in the near future? You might think that, but I couldn't possibly comment.
I love it. Love it. Are you working on more stories with Colter now?
Yeah, the third in the series is about half done. And like the Goodbye Man followed a day after the Never Game, the new book, untitled as yet, follows a day after the Goodbye Man. Now, these three books are a trilogy in which Colter Shaw solves a crime in each book. In the Never Game, it was about a series of kidnappings in Silicon Valley. In the Goodbye Man, it's about the shenanigans of this cult and two extremists who were perhaps racists. And the third one, and that story is concluded. In the Goodbye Man, we see about the cult and there's justice done. But in both of those books, there's this theme of Colter Shaw and his brother and father. And that story keeps getting bigger and bigger. And the plot is richer, I would say, in the Goodbye Man than it was in the Never Game. And now in the third book in the series, the plot involving his father is explained, and that's settled. But at the same time, there'll be another crime that Colter Shaw is involved in. So Colter gets no rest in any of these books. The poor guy needs to take a week off at some point. But after that, once I resolve the father issue, the characters involved in his father's situation will recur throughout the future Colter Shaw books, but I've kind of got the father thing taken care of. So from then on, Colter will just be the itinerant reward seeker, riding into town on his horse called to Winnebago, solving the crime, meeting people, and then going on to a next adventure.
I love it. The Goodbye Man, available everywhere now. Kindle edition, audiobook, hardcover edition, however you like to read books. There's a link in the show notes of this episode where you can grab your copy. Jeff, I know you've got to get over to NPR. Thank you so much for joining us back on the show today. Where can people find you online if they want to dig into all the great stuff you do?
JeffreyDeaver.com, and check me out on Instagram and just at Jeffery Deaver, Facebook, Twitter, and actually on Instagram. I think you could see me with the pandemic. I've been doing a lot of cooking, and so I put some cooking videos up. So if you want to make a Guinness beef stew or a great omelet, just check me out there. It'll be Jeff the Chef.
We sure will. I'll put links to that in the show notes as well. Jeff, always fun getting to catch up with you. Thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show.
Well, thank you, Hank. I hope we can talk again next year.
Absolutely. Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.